Hey everyone! Welcome back to English Without Limit. I'm Julia, and today I have something special for you. Before we start, let me ask you a few questions. Have you ever thought about how much our daily routines say about who we are? Do you ever notice the small things that make your ordinary days unique or interesting? Maybe a friendly chat with a neighbor, your morning walk, or even a funny moment while cooking dinner. Today, I'm going to share a few stories that describe daily life. Simple, relatable, and full of real-life English expressions you can use in your conversations. So sit back, relax, and imagine you're listening to these stories like a friend talking to you. Let's begin. The first story is about a morning that didn't go as planned. Yesterday, I woke up late because my alarm didn't ring. I jumped out of bed, brushed my teeth in a hurry, and grabbed the first outfit I saw. While making coffee, I accidentally spilled some on my shirt. I sighed, changed quickly, and ran to catch the bus. When I finally got on, I realized I had forgotten my wallet at home. At that moment, I felt so frustrated. But then a kind old man sitting nearby smiled and offered to pay for my ticket. He said, "Don't worry, young lady, we all have days like that." His words made me smile. That small act of kindness turned my stressful morning into a warm reminder that there are still good people around us. The next story is about a peaceful Sunday at home. It was a lazy Sunday morning. The sunlight came through my window and the smell of fresh toast filled the air. I made a cup of tea and sat on my balcony watching the birds fly around. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. I didn't check my phone. I didn't rush to do anything. I just sat there, breathing slowly, feeling grateful for the quiet. Later, I watered my plants and listened to some soft music. Sometimes the best days are the ones where nothing big happens, just peace, comfort, and simple joy. Here's another one. A short story about grocery shopping. Last Friday, I went to the supermarket to buy some vegetables and fruits. I made a list before leaving home, but when I got there, I saw so many things that weren't on my list. I ended up buying cookies, chips, and chocolate too. When I was waiting in line to pay, a little girl in front of me was helping her mom put things on the counter. She smiled at me and said, "I like your bag." I smiled back and thanked her. It was such a small thing, but it made me feel happy. It reminded me that small compliments can brighten someone's day. Now, let's move to a story about cooking dinner after work. After a long day, I came home tired, but decided to cook something nice for myself. I looked at the ingredients I had and thought, let's make pasta. I chopped some garlic, tomatoes, and onions. The smell of garlic frying in olive oil filled the kitchen. It was amazing. While cooking, I played my favorite songs. It turned into a relaxing moment instead of a chore. When I finally sat down to eat, I felt proud. It wasn't a fancy meal, but it was made with love and care. That's the beauty of cooking. It makes you feel creative and independent. Next is a story about meeting an old friend by chance. A few days ago, while walking through the park, I heard someone call my name. I turned around and saw my old school friend Daniel. We hadn't seen each other for almost 5 years. We decided to sit on a bench and catch up. We talked about our jobs, families, and memories from school. Time passed so quickly as we laughed and shared stories. It felt good to reconnect with someone from the past. Sometimes unexpected meetings remind us how strong old friendships can be even after years apart. Now let's listen to a story about a rainy evening. It was raining heavily when I was coming home from work. I didn't have an umbrella, so I got completely soaked. But instead of being upset, I decided to enjoy it. I walked slowly through the rain, feeling the cool drops on my skin. People around me were running for cover, but I just smiled. When I finally reached home, I made a hot cup of coffee and sat by the window, listening to the sound of rain. That moment felt peaceful, almost magical. Sometimes we need to slow down and enjoy life's little surprises, even if they come as rain. Next comes a story about helping a stranger. One evening, while walking to the bus stop, I saw a man trying to start his motorbike, but it wouldn't start. Many people passed by, but no one stopped. I hesitated for a second, then walked over and asked if he needed help. He smiled and said, "Yes, please." I helped him push the bike to a nearby repair shop. He thanked me again and again. That simple act of helping someone made me feel genuinely happy. It reminded me that kindness doesn't need to be big, it just needs to be sincere. Then I have a story about a small victory at work. Last week, I was working on a project that took me days to finish. I felt tired and unsure if I was doing it right, but I kept going step by step. Finally, when I presented it to my team, everyone loved it. My boss said, "Great job, Julia." That moment made me realize that hard work really pays off. It doesn't matter how small your progress is, every effort counts. And finally, here's a story about an evening walk. Every evening after dinner, I like to take a short walk around my neighborhood. It helps me relax and think. I often see the same people, a man walking his dog, a woman jogging, and children playing near the park. Sometimes we smile at each other without saying a word. There's something beautiful about those small connections. They remind me that we all share this rhythm of life. Simple, calm, and full of small, beautiful moments. It was a busy Monday morning and the city was already full of movement. Cars honked, people hurried to work, and the air smelled of coffee from nearby cafes. I was standing at the bus stop, holding my bag and trying to keep my eyes open. A man next to me yawned loudly, and we both laughed. "Looks like we both need more sleep," he said. When the bus arrived, it was crowded, but I found a small space to stand near the door. Everyone looked tired, yet in a strange way, it felt comforting. We were all starting our week together, facing the same Monday mood. Now, let's move on to a story about doing laundry. One Saturday, I decided to wash all my clothes. My laundry basket was full and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I sorted my clothes into piles, whites and colors, and started the machine. As it spun, I sat with a cup of tea, watching the clothes turn and mix through the glass. It was oddly satisfying. Later, when I hung them out on the balcony, I smelled the freshness of clean fabric and sunshine. It felt rewarding to see everything neat and tidy. Sometimes, small chores give us a quiet sense of achievement. Here's a story about a visit to the local cafe. Last weekend, I went to a small cafe near my apartment. It's one of those cozy places where the barista remembers your name. As I entered, the smell of roasted coffee beans made me smile. I ordered my usual, a cappuccino, and sat by the window. A soft song played in the background as I watched people walking outside, some chatting, some on their phones. After a while, the barista brought me a little cookie with my drink and said, "It's on the house." That small gesture made my morning brighter. It reminded me that kindness doesn't always come from people we know. Now, here's a story about losing something important. A few months ago, I lost my house keys. I searched my entire bag, my pockets, even my jacket, but they were gone. I felt a wave of panic. I called my friend Emma, who had a spare key, and she came over to help me. Together, we looked everywhere. Finally, she found the keys under my car seat. I felt so relieved that I laughed out loud. We ended up ordering pizza and laughing about how I always lose small things. That day, I learned it's okay to panic a little, but it's even better to have friends who support you. Next is a story about a visit to the park. The park near my home is one of my favorite places. Every morning I see people walking, jogging, or just sitting on benches enjoying the fresh air. One day, I saw a little boy trying to fly a kite, but it kept falling. His dad smiled and said, "Try again, you can do it." After a few tries, the kite finally flew high. The boy shouted with joy, and everyone nearby smiled. That small moment made me think, life is like flying a kite. It takes patience, but when it works, it's beautiful. Let's continue with the story about working from home. A few weeks ago, I had to work from home for several days. At first, it felt comfortable. No commuting, no need to dress up. But soon I realized it was easy to lose focus. My cat kept walking on my keyboard, and I found myself opening the fridge too often. So I made a plan. I set working hours, took short breaks, and even dressed as if I were going to the office. Slowly, I became more productive. The experience taught me that balance and discipline matter even at home. Now, here's a story about visiting the post office. I went to the post office to send a birthday gift to a friend in another city. The line was long and people looked impatient, but there was an elderly lady in front of me who started a friendly conversation. She told me she was sending a letter to her grandson who lived abroad. Her face lit up when she talked about him. When it was her turn, she smiled and said, "Thank you for keeping me company." That small talk made my wait feel much shorter. Sometimes, even in a busy place, a kind conversation can make a big difference. Next is a story about exercising in the morning. I decided to start jogging every morning. On the first day, I was full of energy. On the second day, my legs hurt. By the third day, I almost gave up. But I kept going. After a week, I felt stronger and more active. One morning, while jogging through the park, I saw the sunrise. It was beautiful. The golden light touched the trees and the world felt fresh and new. That moment made me realize that staying consistent, even when it's hard, always brings results. Here's a story about learning to cook something new. I've always loved eating pancakes, but I never tried making them myself. One weekend, I decided to give it a try. I found a recipe online, mixed the ingredients, and poured the batter onto the pan. The first one turned out too thick, the second one too thin, but the third one was perfect. When I finally sat down to eat, I felt so proud. It wasn't just about the pancakes, it was about trying, failing, and improving. Cooking taught me patience and confidence in small steps. Let's move to a story about visiting the library. Last month, I went to the public library for the first time in a long while. As soon as I entered, I smelled old books and paper. It felt comforting. I walked between the shelves, touching the covers and reading titles. I found a novel I had read years ago and borrowed it again. Sitting by the window, I read a few pages and it brought back memories from my school days. The library reminded me how peaceful reading can be away from screens and noise. Here's a story about spending time with family. One Sunday, I visited my parents for dinner. My mom cooked my favorite meal and my dad told his usual funny stories. We laughed, shared memories, and talked about future plans. It was a simple evening, but it filled me with warmth. Sometimes we forget how important family moments are. They remind us where we come from and who truly cares for us. When I left, my mom hugged me tightly and said, "Come more often." That sentence stayed with me. Next is a story about visiting a friend's home. My friend Sarah invited me over for tea last weekend. Her house was full of plants and soft lights. We sat on the sofa, sipping tea and talking for hours. She showed me some of her new artwork and I was amazed by her creativity. We laughed about old memories and shared our goals. When I left, I felt inspired and motivated. Spending time with friends can be one of the best ways to recharge your energy. Now, here's a story about going to the market. On a sunny morning, I went to the local market to buy fresh fruits and vegetables. The place was full of colors: red apples, yellow bananas, green cucumbers. Sellers called out prices and people bargained cheerfully. I bought some mangoes and the seller gave me one extra, saying, "For a good customer." That small act made me smile all the way home. Local markets always feel alive, full of real conversations and human warmth. Here's a story about taking care of a pet. My cat, Luna, is playful and full of energy. One day, she knocked over a glass of water on my laptop. I was shocked, but when I saw her cute face, I couldn't stay angry. I dried everything quickly and was lucky that it still worked. Later, she climbed onto my lap and purred softly. It reminded me that pets, like people, make mistakes too. but they bring us joy, comfort, and unconditional love. Let's talk about a story about a power cut at night. One evening, while I was watching a movie, the lights suddenly went out. At first, I was annoyed, but then I lit a candle, made some tea, and sat quietly. Without electricity, everything felt peaceful. I could hear the sound of crickets and the wind outside. I realized how much noise and distraction we live with daily. That night, I ended up writing in my journal by candlelight, and it felt magical. And finally, for now, a story about helping a neighbor. Last week, I saw my neighbor struggling to carry some heavy boxes upstairs. I quickly went over and offered to help. She smiled and thanked me. As we talked, I learned that she had just moved in. After we finished, she offered me some homemade cookies. It was such a nice exchange. A little help, a little kindness, and a new friendship. It reminded me that community starts with small actions. Our next story is about a visit to the hair salon. Last Thursday, I went to get my hair cut. My hair had grown too long and I wanted a change. When I entered the salon, the hairdresser smiled and said, "So, what are we doing today?" I told her I wanted something fresh, but not too short. We chatted while she cut my hair. She talked about her family, and I shared a few stories from my job. The smell of shampoo filled the room, and I could feel the warm air from the hairdryer. When she showed me the final look, I smiled and said, "Perfect." It felt refreshing, not just because of the haircut, but because of that small, relaxing conversation. Here's a story about a quiet evening with a book. One evening, after a long and tiring day, I decided to read instead of watching TV. I made a cup of green tea, turned on a soft light, and opened a novel I had started weeks ago. As I read, the world outside disappeared. Every word and every scene in the book pulled me in. The characters felt real and the story touched my heart. By the time I finished a few chapters, I felt calm and recharged. It reminded me that reading is like traveling. You go somewhere new without leaving your seat. Now let's talk about a funny mistake while cooking. One Sunday, I wanted to try a new soup recipe I saw online. It looked easy, vegetables, spices, and broth, but I accidentally added too much salt. When I tasted it, it was almost impossible to eat. I laughed at myself and started over. This time, I followed the recipe carefully, and it turned out delicious. Cooking mistakes can be frustrating, but they're also a great way to learn. Now I always double-check before adding anything to the pot. Here's a story about going to the gym for the first time. I joined a gym because I wanted to get stronger and more active. On my first day, everything felt new. The machines looked complicated, and people around me seemed so confident. I felt a little shy, but the trainer smiled and helped me get started. After a few minutes of exercise, I felt my heart racing, but it also felt good. By the end of the session, I was sweaty but proud. Every time I go now, I remember that everyone starts somewhere, and progress is what really matters. Next, we have a story about a walk in the rain. It started raining just as I was leaving work. I didn't have an umbrella, so I decided to walk slowly instead of rushing. The streets were shining with reflections, and the sound of raindrops was soft and calming. I saw people running to stay dry, but I didn't mind getting wet. When I reached home, I changed into warm clothes and made hot chocolate. That simple walk in the rain made me realize how beautiful life can be when we stop worrying about small things. Here's a story about trying meditation for the first time. A few months ago, I started feeling stressed about work and daily responsibilities. A friend suggested meditation. At first, I thought it would be boring, but I decided to try. I sat on the floor, closed my eyes, and focused on my breathing. My mind kept wandering, but slowly I started to feel calm. After 10 minutes, I opened my eyes and felt lighter. Since then, I try to meditate every morning. It helps me stay peaceful and focused throughout the day. Let's go to a story about buying something online. I ordered a new pair of shoes from an online store. They looked perfect in the picture, comfortable and stylish. When the package arrived, I opened it excitedly, but the shoes were too big. I laughed and thought, that's the risk of online shopping. I contacted customer service, returned the shoes, and got the right size a week later. It was a small inconvenience, but it taught me to always check the size chart carefully. Here's a story about visiting a museum. Last weekend, I went to an art museum with my cousin. The building was quiet, and the air smelled of old wood and paint. We walked through rooms filled with paintings and sculptures. Some pieces were modern and abstract, while others were traditional and realistic. My cousin and I discussed what we saw and shared our opinions. It felt nice to see creativity and imagination in every corner. At the end, we sat in the cafe inside the museum, sipping coffee and talking about how art connects people no matter their background. Now here's a story about forgetting a friend's birthday. One morning, I opened my phone and saw a message from my friend saying, "Thank you for remembering my birthday." My heart dropped. I had completely forgotten. I quickly called her and apologized. She laughed and said, "It's okay, you can make it up to me with ice cream." Later that evening, we met and celebrated together. It reminded me how forgiving true friends can be, and how even small mistakes can turn into sweet memories. Next is a story about gardening. During spring, I started planting flowers on my balcony. At first, I didn't know much about gardening, but I learned by watching videos and reading tips online. I planted sunflowers, mint, and basil. Every morning, I watered them and watched them grow. When the first sunflower bloomed, I felt proud. Gardening taught me patience and the joy of seeing something grow because of your care. Now my balcony looks bright and full of life. Here's a story about a short trip out of town. Last month, I went on a weekend trip with 2 friends. We took a bus to a small town near the hills. The air was clean and the streets were peaceful. We walked around, tried local food, and talked to friendly shop owners. At night, we sat near a campfire watching the stars. It felt wonderful to disconnect from city life and enjoy simple things: fresh air, laughter, and friendship. The trip was short, but the memories will last a long time. Now, let's hear a story about cleaning the house. One morning, I decided to do a full cleaning. I turned on some upbeat music and started with the kitchen. I washed dishes, wiped shelves, and organized everything. Then I moved to the living room, dusted the furniture, and vacuumed the floor. After 2 hours, I was exhausted, but proud. The house smelled fresh and everything looked perfect. It reminded me how satisfying it feels to live in a clean and organized space. Here's a story about buying gifts for others. During the holiday season, I love choosing gifts for my friends and family. I try to find something that suits each person, something thoughtful, not just expensive. Last year, I bought my best friend a small plant because she loves nature. She smiled and said, "This is the best gift ever." That made me happy. I realized gifts don't need to be big to show love. They just need to come from the heart. Let's move to a story about using public transport. One morning, the bus I usually take was late. Everyone at the stop looked annoyed, checking their watches. Finally, the bus arrived and we all rushed in. I found a seat near the window and started listening to music. As we moved through the city, I watched people walking, shops opening, and sunlight touching the buildings. That moment made me feel calm. Sometimes waiting teaches patience, and even a delayed bus can lead to a peaceful moment. Here's a story about a visit to the dentist. I had been avoiding my dental appointment for months. Finally, I gathered courage and went. The dentist was friendly and said, "Don't worry, it'll be quick." I sat nervously while he checked my teeth. Luckily, everything was fine. Before I left, he smiled and said, "You're taking good care of your teeth." I felt proud and promised to come regularly. It reminded me that facing small fears always feels better than avoiding them. Now let's listen to a story about learning a new language. When I started learning Spanish, it felt very difficult. I could understand some words but couldn't form full sentences. Still, I practiced every day, watching videos, reading simple texts, and repeating phrases out loud. After a few months, I noticed progress. I could talk to a friend from Spain using short sentences. That moment gave me confidence. Learning a new language is challenging, but it opens your world in beautiful ways. Here's a story about a lazy afternoon. One Sunday, I had no plans at all. I stayed in my pajamas, ordered food, and watched my favorite show. I didn't worry about work or cleaning. I just let myself relax. Sometimes we need lazy days to rest our minds and bodies. That day reminded me that rest is not a waste of time. It is part of taking care of yourself. Next is a story about helping a friend move. My friend James was moving to a new apartment and he asked for help. I went early in the morning and together we packed boxes, lifted furniture, and cleaned the old place. It was hard work, but we laughed the whole time. In the end, we ordered pizza and sat on the floor surrounded by boxes, eating and talking. It felt good to help someone and to be part of their new beginning. Now, here's a story about watching the sunset. One evening, I walked to a nearby hill to watch the sunset. The sky turned orange to pink to purple. The air was cool and peaceful. People around me took photos, but I just watched quietly. The beauty of that moment reminded me that every day ends with a little piece of magic. Sometimes we just need to pause and notice it. Our next story is about a quiet morning jog. Last Saturday, I decided to go for a morning jog in the park. The air was fresh and the sun was just rising. I could hear birds singing and the soft crunch of leaves under my shoes. At first, I felt a little tired, but soon I started enjoying the rhythm of running. I waved at a few people walking their dogs, and they waved back. The experience made me feel calm and energized at the same time. Sometimes, starting the day with a small routine like jogging can make the whole day better. Here's a story about trying a new café. A friend told me about a new café downtown, so I decided to check it out. When I entered, the smell of fresh coffee and baked pastries filled the room. The walls were decorated with colorful paintings and soft music played in the background. I ordered a latte and a croissant. While sipping coffee, I noticed a couple sitting nearby reading books and a group of students chatting about their homework. It felt nice to sit there and watch life go by. That small visit reminded me that exploring new places can be relaxing and inspiring. Next is a story about helping a child with homework. Last week, my neighbor asked me to help her son, Alex, with math homework. At first, he looked frustrated and said, "I don't understand this at all." I sat with him patiently and explained step by step. We worked together, and after a while, he smiled and said, "Now I get it." That small moment made me happy. Helping someone, even in a small way, gives a sense of satisfaction that is hard to describe. Here's a story about finding a new hobby. A few months ago, I decided to try painting. I bought a small set of watercolors and a sketchbook. The first few attempts looked messy, but I kept practicing. Slowly, my paintings improved. One evening, I painted a sunset from memory. When I looked at it, I felt proud. It didn't matter if it was perfect. What mattered was that I was learning and enjoying the process. Finding a hobby like painting makes life more colorful and fun. Now, let's listen to a story about waiting for a friend. I was waiting at a cafe for my friend Emily, who was late. I ordered a tea and sat near the window. At first, I felt a little impatient, but then I started watching people outside. A dog chased a ball, a man bought flowers, and a child laughed while running with his mother. By the time Emily arrived, I realized that waiting isn't always bad. Sometimes it gives you a chance to observe life and enjoy small moments. Here's a story about a rainy day indoors. One rainy afternoon, I stayed at home and decided to bake cookies. The sound of rain tapping on the windows was relaxing. I mixed flour, sugar, and butter, and soon the aroma of baking cookies filled the kitchen. While waiting, I listened to music and looked outside at people with umbrellas passing by. When the cookies were ready, I shared them with my family. That day reminded me that even rainy days can be full of warmth and happiness if you spend time doing simple things. Next is a story about attending a local market fair. Last month, there was a small fair in my neighborhood. I went in the afternoon. There were stalls selling handmade crafts, snacks, and fresh fruits. I tried a piece of local cake and chatted with the seller about how she makes her crafts. Children ran around with balloons, and musicians played soft tunes nearby. I bought a small handmade notebook as a gift for my cousin. Visiting the fair made me feel part of the community and showed me how vibrant everyday life can be. Here's a story about taking a short bus ride. One morning, I took a short bus ride across the city. The bus was almost full, but I found a seat near the window. I watched the city streets pass by, shops opening, people rushing to work, and sunlight reflecting on buildings. A young man sitting next to me offered me his seat when I was standing for a moment. That little kindness reminded me that small gestures can make someone's day brighter. By the time I reached my stop, I felt more connected to the world around me. Next, we have a story about cooking a family recipe. Last weekend, I decided to cook my grandmother's famous stew. I followed her old recipe carefully, chopping vegetables, adding spices, and simmering everything slowly. The smell reminded me of my childhood, and I felt happy and nostalgic. When my family sat down to eat, everyone complimented the taste. Cooking that recipe made me feel connected to my roots and taught me the joy of preserving family traditions. Here's a story about a morning at the beach. One sunny morning, I went to the beach with a friend. The sand was warm and the waves were calm. We walked along the shore collecting seashells and talking about our plans. A group of children built a sandcastle nearby, laughing as they played. I breathed in the fresh sea air and felt relaxed. Spending time in nature, even for a short while, reminded me how refreshing simple outdoor moments can be. Next is a story about learning to ride a bicycle. A few months ago, I bought a bicycle. At first, I was scared of falling, but I practiced every evening in the park. My friend helped me balance and gave me tips. Slowly, I learned to ride confidently. One evening, I rode around the park without any help, feeling the wind on my face. One evening, I decided to cook a simple pasta dinner for myself. I boiled the pasta, added sauce, and sprinkled some cheese on top. I lit a small candle and played soft music. While eating, I enjoyed the quiet and reflected on my day. It was simple, but it made me feel happy and content. Moments like these remind me that self-care can be small and meaningful. Next, let's listen to a story about a walk with a pet. I took my dog Max for an evening walk in the park. He was excited, running around and sniffing everything. I noticed other people walking their dogs too. We exchanged greetings and shared small smiles. Max chased a butterfly and ran back to me wagging his tail. Watching him enjoy simple things made me realize how important it is to enjoy small moments in life. Pets can teach us happiness in the simplest ways. Here's a story about a visit to a friend's workplace. a friend invited me to see his office. I was curious about his daily routine. I watched him work, saw how he managed emails, and met some of his colleagues. It was interesting to see a different work environment and how people cooperate to get tasks done. After a while, we went to a small café nearby and discussed our work experiences. Visiting his office gave me new perspectives and ideas for my own routines. Next is a story about a short trip to the countryside. One weekend, I went to the countryside with my family. The air was clean and the landscape was beautiful. Green fields, tall trees, and small streams. We walked, took photos, and enjoyed fresh fruits from a local farm. The children ran freely and birds sang in the distance. That trip reminded me how relaxing it is to leave the city for a while and enjoy nature. Even a short visit can recharge your mind and body. Here's a story about buying coffee for a friend. One morning, I decided to surprise my friend with coffee. I went to her favorite cafe, ordered a cappuccino and a muffin, and brought it to her office. She looked surprised and happy and said, "You didn't have to do this." I smiled and said, "I just wanted to make your morning better." That simple gesture reminded me that small acts of kindness can strengthen friendships and make ordinary days special. Next is a story about organizing a small event at home. I invited a few friends over for a movie night. I cleaned the living room, arranged snacks, and set up a cozy area with cushions and blankets. When my friends arrived, we watched a comedy movie, laughed a lot, and shared stories. The night was simple, but it created happy memories. Hosting a small event at home can be a beautiful way to connect with friends and enjoy life without needing anything extravagant. Here's a story about shopping for groceries online. I needed to buy fruits, vegetables, and some snacks, so I tried an online grocery app for the first time. It was easy. I chose the items, paid online, and selected a delivery time. Later that afternoon, the delivery arrived at my door. Everything was fresh and neatly packed. I realized that technology makes simple tasks like grocery shopping much more convenient, leaving more time for other activities. Next is a story about enjoying a quiet morning with tea. I woke up early one Sunday and made a cup of tea. I sat by the window, feeling the sunlight touch my face. Birds were chirping, and the air was fresh. I didn't check my phone or think about work. I just enjoyed the quiet moment. Sometimes, spending a few minutes alone in the morning can set a positive tone for the rest of the day. Here's a story about helping someone carry groceries. While walking home, I saw an elderly man struggling to carry his grocery bags. I offered to help, and he smiled gratefully. Together, we walked to his apartment. He thanked me several times, and I felt warm inside. That small act of helping someone reminded me that kindness doesn't need to be big. It just needs to be genuine. Next is a story about cooking breakfast on the weekend. One Saturday, I decided to make a special breakfast, pancakes with honey and fruit. I mixed the batter, fried the pancakes, and arranged them nicely on a plate. The aroma filled the kitchen, and when I tasted them, I felt proud of myself. Cooking a nice breakfast for yourself can be a simple way to start the day happily. Our next story is about a peaceful morning with breakfast and music. One Sunday morning, I woke up a little later than usual. The sun was shining softly through the window. I made a cup of coffee and some toast with jam. While eating, I turned on my favorite playlist. The combination of warm coffee, sweet toast, and soft music made me feel completely relaxed. I didn't check my phone or think about work. I just enjoyed the moment. Sometimes small routines like this remind us how little things can make a day feel special. Here's a story about taking a walk in the evening. I often take a short walk after dinner. One evening, I walked through my neighborhood park. The air was cool and the sky had a beautiful orange color. Children were playing and a few people were jogging. I noticed a couple walking hand in hand and smiled at them. Walking slowly allowed me to think about my day, appreciate the small moments, and feel calm. Evening walks are simple, but they can clear your mind and give you energy for the next day. Next is a story about learning to bake bread. A few weeks ago, I decided to try baking bread at home. I watched a video tutorial, measured the flour, water, and yeast, and mixed everything carefully. At first, the dough didn't rise as I expected, and I felt frustrated. I tried again, and this time it worked perfectly. The smell of freshly baked bread filled my kitchen, and when I tasted it, I felt proud of myself. Learning something new can be challenging, but the satisfaction of success makes it worth trying. Here's a story about a short trip to the bookstore. I love visiting bookstores. One afternoon, I went to a nearby shop to browse for novels. The shelves were full of colorful books. I picked up a mystery novel I had heard about and read the first few pages. While sitting in the reading corner, I noticed a young girl reading quietly, completely absorbed in her story. It reminded me how books can transport us to another world. Buying a book and reading it slowly is a simple pleasure that never gets old. Next is a story about making a new friend at the park. Last weekend, I was feeding birds in the park when a young woman came over and said hello. We started talking and soon discovered we had similar hobbies. We exchanged numbers and promised to meet again. It felt nice to connect with someone new in such a simple and natural way. Sometimes friendships begin in the most ordinary places like a park or a cafe. Here's a short adventure in the city. One day, I decided to explore a street I hadn't walked down before. I discovered small shops selling handmade jewelry, a tiny coffee shop, and a street artist painting beautiful murals. I took photos and talked to the shop owners. That short walk made me feel like I had discovered a hidden part of my own city. Exploring new streets can be exciting, even if it's close to home. Next is a story about helping a friend cook dinner. My friend invited me over one evening to cook together. We decided to make pasta with a tomato and basil sauce. I chopped vegetables while my friend boiled the pasta. We laughed as we tried to follow the recipe exactly. When we finally sat down to eat, the food was delicious and the experience was even better. Cooking together not only creates a meal, it creates laughter and connection. Here's a story about a rainy morning walk. One morning, it rained lightly. I put on my raincoat and boots and went for a short walk. The streets were quiet and the air smelled fresh. I watched raindrops fall on leaves and puddles. A child jumped happily into a puddle, splashing water everywhere. I smiled and continued walking slowly, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. Rainy mornings can feel calm and refreshing if we take a moment to notice them. Next is a story about taking public transport and meeting new people. One afternoon, I took a bus to visit a friend. The bus was crowded, but I found a seat next to an elderly man. We started talking about the weather, our routines, and favorite foods. He shared stories from his childhood, and I listened with interest. By the time we reached our stops, I felt like I had learned something new. Talking to strangers politely can make even a short bus ride enjoyable and educational. Here's a story about a quiet evening at home watching a movie. I decided to spend an evening alone watching a classic movie. I made popcorn and brewed a cup of tea. As I watched, I laughed, cried, and felt absorbed in the story. When the movie ended, I reflected on the plot and characters. Even spending time alone can be comforting and fulfilling if you enjoy it mindfully. Simple pleasures like this are part of everyday happiness. Next is a story about visiting a friend's new apartment. My friend recently moved to a new apartment and invited me to see it. The place was small but cozy, decorated with plants and soft lights. We sat on the sofa, drank tea, and talked about our work and hobbies. I helped her arrange a few items, and we laughed at little mistakes. Visiting a friend's home can be a way to share joy and learn about their tastes and personality. Here's a story about trying a new exercise routine. I joined a yoga class last month. At first, I struggled with some poses and felt clumsy, but the instructor was kind and encouraging. I practiced regularly, and after a few weeks, I noticed improvements in my strength and flexibility. I also felt calmer and more focused. Trying a new form of exercise can be challenging, but the benefits make it worthwhile. Next is a story about preparing a surprise for a family member. My brother's birthday was coming up and I wanted to surprise him. I baked a cake, decorated the living room, and hid a small gift. When he came home, he looked surprised and happy. We celebrated together and he thanked me warmly. Small gestures like this show love and care, and they create happy memories. Here's a story about exploring a local park in the morning. One morning, I went to a park I hadn't visited before. The grass was wet with dew, and the sun was rising slowly. I saw people jogging, walking dogs, and doing stretches. I joined a quiet trail and walked slowly, noticing flowers, birds, and the soft breeze. Exploring new areas nearby can give you a fresh perspective and make your routine feel more interesting. Next is a story about learning to play a simple song on the guitar. I recently decided to learn guitar. At first, my fingers hurt and I couldn't press the strings properly. I practiced a little every day, learning chords and simple songs. One evening, I managed to play a short song without mistakes. The feeling of accomplishment was wonderful. Learning a musical instrument takes patience, but it is fun and rewarding. Next is a story about a morning routine that feels comforting. I like to start my day with a small routine. I wake up, stretch, brush my teeth, and make a cup of tea. I sit by the window, watch the world wake up, and breathe slowly. These small actions make me feel ready for the day. A simple morning routine can create a sense of calm and control, making everyday life more enjoyable. Next is a story about helping someone with directions. Last week, a tourist stopped me on the street asking for directions. I explained the way to the museum nearby. She smiled and thanked me, saying, "You are very kind." Helping someone even in a small way can make both of you feel good. Everyday acts of kindness make communities friendlier and happier. Here's a story about visiting a local bakery one morning. I walked to a small bakery near my home one morning. The smell of fresh bread and pastries filled the air. I bought a loaf of bread and a few buns. The baker smiled and asked, "Is this for breakfast?" I nodded, and he wrapped everything carefully. Eating that fresh bread at home made me realize how small moments, like a visit to a bakery, can bring comfort and joy. Next is a story about a short walk in the countryside. A few weeks ago, I went to a small village nearby. The streets were quiet and the air smelled like flowers and fresh grass. I walked slowly, taking pictures of the scenery and talking to friendly locals. I bought fresh fruits from a small market stall. The walk was peaceful and gave me energy for the week ahead. Sometimes leaving the city, even briefly, can refresh your mind and spirit. Here's a story about organizing a small corner of your home. I noticed my bookshelf was messy, so I decided to organize it. I arranged books by size and color, cleaned the shelves, and added a small plant. After finishing, the space looked neat and cozy. Organizing even a small corner of your home can create a sense of accomplishment and make your environment more pleasant. Next is a story about making a simple gift for a friend. I decided to make a handmade card for my friend's birthday. I drew a few flowers, wrote a small message, and decorated it with colors. When I gave it to her, she smiled and hugged me. Simple handmade gifts often feel more personal and thoughtful than store-bought ones. Here's a story about trying a new recipe for the first time. I found a recipe for vegetable stir-fry online and wanted to try it. I chopped carrots, broccoli, and peppers, mixed everything with soy sauce, and cooked carefully. The first attempt tasted a little salty, but the second one was perfect. Cooking new recipes teaches patience and creativity, and it's exciting to try flavors you haven't made before. Next is a story about a short morning visit to a cafe. I went to a small cafe for breakfast one morning. I ordered a coffee and a croissant and sat near the window. While sipping my drink, I watched people walking to work, children playing, and the sun rising. That short visit made me feel calm and gave me a peaceful start to the day. Even small visits to favorite places can bring comfort and happiness. Here's a story about taking a short nap during the day. One afternoon, I felt very tired after working. I decided to lie down for a short nap. I closed my eyes, listened to soft music, and rested for about 30 minutes. When I woke up, I felt refreshed and ready to continue my day. Small moments of rest can make a big difference in energy and mood. Next is a story about enjoying a sunset on a balcony. I went to my balcony one evening to watch the sunset. The sky turned pink, orange, and purple, and the city looked calm. I sat quietly sipping a cup of tea and enjoyed the view. Watching the sunset reminded me to pause, relax, and appreciate beauty in simple moments. Here's a story about a short walk with headphones and music. I decided to take a walk while listening to music. The rhythm matched my steps, and I felt relaxed. I noticed people passing by, children playing, and birds singing. The combination of music and walking helped me clear my mind and feel happier. Simple routines like this can improve mood and make ordinary moments more enjoyable. Next is a story about meeting a neighbor by chance. I ran into my neighbor while taking out the trash. We started talking about the weather, our apartment, and weekend plans. The conversation was short, but it felt warm and friendly. Small chats like this make neighborhoods feel more connected and welcoming. Our next story is about a quiet morning with journaling. One Saturday morning, I decided to spend some time writing in my journal. I made a cup of herbal tea, sat by the window, and started noting down my thoughts from the week. I wrote about things I was grateful for, little goals for the next week, and small lessons I had learned. Writing quietly helped me organize my thoughts and feel calmer. Journaling can be a simple but powerful way to reflect on life and stay mindful. Here's a story about visiting a local farmer's market. Last Sunday, I went to a farmer's market near my neighborhood. Stalls were full of fresh vegetables, fruits, homemade bread, and colorful flowers. I bought some tomatoes, strawberries, and a small bouquet of daisies. The sellers were friendly and we chatted about seasonal produce. Walking through the market, tasting small samples, and observing the lively atmosphere made me feel connected to my community. It was a simple pleasure, but very rewarding. Next is a story about a short bike ride around the neighborhood. I decided to ride my bicycle in the late afternoon. The streets were quiet and the sun was starting to set. I rode slowly, enjoying the gentle breeze and the sound of my wheels on the pavement.
I passed familiar shops and greeted neighbors along the way. The ride was peaceful and gave me time to think and relax. Sometimes even a short bike ride can make you feel free and happy.
Here's a story about cooking a simple lunch at home. One day, I had a few vegetables in my fridge and decided to make a stir-fry. I chopped onions, carrots, and bell peppers and added a little soy sauce. While cooking, the aroma filled the kitchen, making me hungry. When I finally sat down to eat, I enjoyed my simple meal and felt proud that I had made it myself. Cooking at home can be easy and comforting, especially when you try simple recipes that are quick to make. Next is a story about taking a short walk to the library. I decided to visit the library one afternoon to borrow a book. The streets were calm and the sun was warm. At the library, I found a quiet corner and sat down to read for a while. The peaceful atmosphere and the smell of books made me feel calm and focused. Reading in the library reminded me how valuable small, quiet moments can be. Sometimes a short visit to a library is enough to feel refreshed and inspired. Here's a story about buying a small gift for a neighbor. I wanted to thank my neighbor for helping me carry groceries last week. I bought a small box of chocolates and knocked on their door. They were surprised and smiled warmly, saying, "Thank you, that's very kind." It felt good to show appreciation even with a simple gift. Small gestures like this can make relationships stronger and create happiness for both people. Next is a story about a short evening walk with a friend. One evening, my friend invited me to walk around our neighborhood. We talked about work, school, hobbies, and our plans for the weekend. The air was cool and the sky was turning purple with the setting sun. Walking while talking made the evening feel relaxed and enjoyable. Spending time with friends during simple activities can be refreshing and strengthen bonds. Here's a story about discovering a new café while walking. I was walking near my home when I noticed a small café I hadn't seen before. I went inside and ordered a cappuccino. The aroma of coffee and freshly baked pastries was comforting. I found a quiet spot and spent half an hour reading a short story while sipping my coffee. In all of these stories, the moments were small. A walk, a coffee, a short chat, a bit of organizing, a sunset, a nap, a homemade gift. Yet each one brought comfort, peace, connection, or joy. We often think happiness comes from big achievements or big changes, but many times it is built quietly through the way we live our ordinary days. When we pay attention to small routines, we begin to notice how rich life already is. A short walk can reset the mind. A conversation with a neighbor can strengthen the community. A clean corner can improve our mood. A simple homemade gift can touch someone's heart. You don't need to wait for the right moment or a big event to feel alive and grateful. You can begin with something simple today. A cup of tea, a quiet page of writing, a fresh breeze from an open window. Small actions, repeated often, create a life that feels full and meaningful.